Marcus Chen wiped the grease from his hands as he walked through the salvage yards of Station Omega-7. The massive space station orbited a dead star, serving as the galaxy's biggest junkyard. Ships from every known species brought their broken technology here to be recycled or scrapped. Marcus had worked as a mechanic on the station for 5 years, and he thought he had seen everything. The Zephyrian merchant's voice was high and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Please, human mechanic, I need this creature gone today. My cargo hold cannot accommodate it for the journey home." Marcus looked at the creature in the small containment cage. It was about the size of a house cat, with scales that shifted from deep purple to black, depending on how the light hit them. 2 small wings were folded against its back, and its eyes were a brilliant gold that seemed to hold intelligence. The creature looked exhausted and defeated. "What species is it?" Marcus asked, crouching down to get a better look. The Zephyrian's tentacles writhed with what Marcus had learned was embarrassment. "It is called a Draconis Eternus. My research team found it on a dead world in the Forgotten Sector. We believed it might be valuable, but—" The merchant's voice trailed off. "But?" Marcus prompted. "It does nothing. No special abilities, no valuable biological compounds, no useful technology integration. It just exists. The galactic markets have no interest in such creatures. Even the exotic pet traders rejected it." The Zephyrian's voice became more desperate. "I cannot afford to feed it or transport it further. I will give it to you for 3 credits. Please." Marcus felt something stir in his chest as he looked at the small creature. In his 5 years working with alien species, he had developed a reputation for being fair and honest. Other species trusted him in ways they didn't trust most humans. But this felt different. The creature's golden eyes met his, and for a moment, Marcus could swear he saw something ancient and sad looking back at him. 3 credits was nothing. Marcus spent more than that on coffee each morning. "What does it eat?" "Standard protein blocks, some mineral supplements, very little." The Zephyrian was already preparing the transfer documents on his datapad. "You are doing me a great service, human." Marcus transferred the 3 credits and watched as the merchant hurried away, clearly relieved to be rid of his burden. Marcus was left alone with the creature, who was still watching him with those intelligent golden eyes. "Well, little guy, looks like you're coming home with me." Marcus carefully lifted the containment cage. The creature didn't struggle or make any sound. It just continued to watch him. Marcus's apartment was small but comfortable, located in the residential sector of the station. It was one of the perks of being a skilled mechanic. The station administration wanted to keep good workers happy. He had converted part of his living space into a workshop where he worked on personal projects and repaired items for friends. He set the cage down on his workbench and opened it slowly. "Come on out. You're safe here." The creature didn't move at first, then very slowly, it stepped out of the cage and onto the workbench. It looked around Marcus's workshop, taking in the various tools, half-finished projects, and technical manuals scattered around. "You hungry?" Marcus asked, going to his food synthesizer. He programmed it for basic protein blocks and brought them back to the workbench. The creature sniffed the food delicately, then began to eat with small, careful bites. Over the next few hours, Marcus found himself talking to the creature as he worked on a plasma conduit that needed repair. "The thing is, everyone out here thinks humans are just good for manual labor and fighting. They don't expect us to understand the finer points of alien technology." He held up a component that most mechanics would have declared irreparable. "But we're good at seeing patterns, at understanding how things work together." The creature had finished eating and was now perched on the edge of the workbench, watching Marcus work. Its head tilted slightly as Marcus spoke, as if it was truly listening. "The Kashari think we're too aggressive. The Vorthon think we're too emotional. The Crystalline Collective thinks we're too chaotic." Marcus smiled as he successfully repaired the conduit. But that's what makes us good at this job. We don't follow the manual exactly, we improvise. As the station's artificial night cycle began, Marcus realized he had been talking to the creature for hours. It had watched every movement, every repair technique, with what seemed like genuine interest. "I should probably give you a name," Marcus said, settling into his chair. "How about Ember? Those scales look like they're holding fire inside them." The creature, Ember, made a soft sound that might have been approval. Marcus reached out slowly, and to his surprise, Ember moved forward and allowed Marcus to gently stroke the scales along its neck. They were warm and smooth, and Marcus could feel a faint vibration, almost like purring. The next morning, Marcus woke to find Ember perched on his nightstand, watching him. Those golden eyes seemed even more alert than they had the day before. "Morning, Ember. Ready to come to work with me?" Marcus had fashioned a small perch that he could attach to his tool belt. Ember seemed to understand and climbed onto it without hesitation. As they walked through the station corridors toward the maintenance bay, Marcus noticed that other species were staring at them with curiosity. "What is that creature?" asked Vextar, a Kashari engineer who worked in the same department. His 4 arms were crossed in a gesture Marcus had learned indicated skepticism. "A Draconis Eternus. I adopted him yesterday." Marcus began setting up his workstation for the day's assignments. Vextar's large, dark eyes examined Ember carefully. "I have heard of this species. They are considered worthless by most standards. No practical applications. Maybe that's because nobody's given them a chance to show what they can do," Marcus replied, pulling up his first work order on his terminal. It was a complex repair job on a Vorthan starship's navigation system. As Marcus began working, he found himself explaining each step to Ember, just as he had the night before. The little creature watched everything with intense focus, its head moving to follow Marcus's hands as he worked with delicate instruments and alien technology. Hours into the job, Marcus encountered a problem. The navigation system's quantum matrix had a cascade failure that wasn't responding to standard repair protocols. He tried 3 different approaches, but the system remained dead. "I don't understand it," Marcus muttered, studying the diagnostic readouts. "The components all test fine individually, but when they're integrated, nothing works." Ember made a soft chirping sound and looked directly at a specific panel on the navigation console. Marcus followed its gaze and noticed something he had missed, a tiny coupling that was almost invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. "How did you—" Marcus began, then shook his head. He checked the coupling and found it was indeed the problem, a microscopic crack that his instruments hadn't detected. When he replaced it, the entire navigation system came back online. Vextar, who had been watching from nearby, approached with all 4 arms spread in amazement. "How did you find that fault? My people designed this system, and even I did not see it." Marcus looked down at Ember, who was preening his small wings with what looked suspiciously like satisfaction. "I had some help." Word of the difficult repair spread quickly through the maintenance bay. By the end of the day, several other mechanics and engineers had approached Marcus with challenging problems. Each time, as Marcus worked and explained his process to Ember, he found himself noticing details he might have missed otherwise. Ember's presence seemed to sharpen his focus, make him more aware of the subtle patterns and connections in the alien technology. That evening, as they returned to Marcus's apartment, he realized that something fundamental had changed. Ember wasn't just a pet or a companion. There was a partnership forming between them, something that went beyond the normal relationship between a human and an animal. "You know, Ember," Marcus said as he prepared dinner for both of them, "I think that merchant was wrong about you being useless. I think maybe you've just been waiting for the right person to work with. Ember chirped softly and settled onto his favorite spot on the workbench, those golden eyes bright with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as contentment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve. But for the first time since coming to Station Omega 7, Marcus felt like he had found something, someone who truly understood his work. Neither of them knew that this was just the beginning, that the universe was about to discover what happened when human ingenuity combined with something far more ancient and powerful than anyone had imagined. 3 weeks after Marcus brought Ember home, their reputation had grown throughout Station Omega 7. What started as curious whispers about the human mechanic and his strange pet had become something much more significant. Engineers from across the galaxy were requesting Marcus specifically for their most challenging repair jobs. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when Commander Thexera, a high-ranking Vorthon military officer, arrived at the maintenance bay with a problem that had stumped their best technicians for months. "Human Marcus?" The commander's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. "I require your assistance with a matter of utmost importance." Marcus looked up from the plasma relay he was calibrating. Ember, now a permanent fixture on his shoulder, chirped once in what Marcus had learned was his way of saying hello to new people. "What can I help you with, Commander?" Thexera gestured toward the massive ship visible through the bay's viewing port. It was a Vorthon dreadnought, easily a kilometer long and bristling with weapons arrays. The INV Sovereign's primary reactor core has been experiencing quantum fluctuations that threaten to destabilize the entire power grid. Our engineers estimate a 73% probability of catastrophic failure within the next 48 hours. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Reactor cores were not something mechanics typically worked on. Those were usually handled by specialized engineers with decades of training. "Commander, I'm honored by your confidence, but reactor work is outside my usual scope." "Our usual scope has failed," Thexera replied curtly. "We have consulted with engineers from 7 different species. All have pronounced the reactor beyond repair. The only alternatives are complete replacement, which would take 6 months, or—" The commander's expression grew grim. "Evacuation and controlled detonation." Marcus glanced at Ember, who had gone very still on his shoulder. Those golden eyes were fixed on the dreadnought with an intensity Marcus had never seen before. "I'll need full access to your technical specifications and permission to bring my assistant," Marcus said, indicating Ember. Thexera's eyes narrowed as she studied the small creature. "Your pet? This is a military vessel, not a leisure facility." "Ember isn't just a pet, Commander. He's my partner. Where I go, he goes." For a moment, Marcus thought the commander would refuse. Then her expression softened slightly. "Very well. But understand, human, if you cannot solve this problem, you will be evacuated with the rest of us before the reactor reaches critical failure." The interior of a Vorthon dreadnought was both beautiful and intimidating. Everything was designed with mathematical precision, from the crystalline walls that pulsed with inner light to the corridors that curved according to some complex geometric pattern. Marcus found it disorienting, but Ember seemed completely at ease, his head turning to track the energy flows that were invisible to human eyes. The reactor core chamber was a massive spherical room at the heart of the ship. The core itself hung suspended in the center, a perfect crystal formation about the size of a shuttlecraft. It should have been glowing with steady blue-white light. Instead, it flickered erratically, the light shifting through the spectrum in chaotic patterns. "The quantum matrix inside the core has become unstable," explained Chief Engineer Kolveth, an elderly Vorthon with intricate tattoos covering his scaled skin. "Each time we attempt to recalibrate, the instability increases. We believe there is a fundamental flaw in our understanding of the core's quantum state." Marcus spent the first hour studying the technical specifications while Ember perched on a nearby control console. The mathematics involved were staggering, quantum field equations that required advanced computational systems just to process. But as Marcus read, Ember began to move. The small creature climbed down from the console and walked slowly around the chamber, his golden eyes fixed on the flickering core. He would stop at certain points, tilt his head as if listening to something, then move on. Marcus found himself watching Ember's path more carefully than the technical readouts. "Ember, what are you hearing?" The creature chirped once and returned to where Marcus was standing. Then he did something that made everyone in the chamber stop and stare. Ember began to hum. It was a low, harmonic sound that seemed to resonate with the chamber itself. As the humming continued, the chaotic flickering of the core began to slow, the light patterns becoming less erratic. "Impossible," whispered Kolveth. "The creature is somehow influencing the quantum field." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as understanding began to dawn. "Ember, can you show me where the problem is?" Ember stopped humming and flew. Actually flew, using those small wings Marcus had thought were decorative, to a specific point near the core housing. He perched there and looked back at Marcus expectantly. Marcus approached the spot Ember had indicated and began scanning with his instruments. At first, everything looked normal. Then he adjusted the scanner to look for quantum field irregularities and found it. A tiny distortion in space-time itself, invisible to normal sensors but clearly detectable to whatever senses Ember possessed. "There's a microfracture in the quantum substrate," Marcus announced. "It's not in the core itself, but in the space around it. That's why your recalibrations kept failing. You were trying to fix the wrong thing." The repair took 14 hours. Marcus had to jury-rig a quantum field generator using parts from 3 different ship systems, while Ember continued to hum at specific frequencies that somehow stabilized the core long enough for the work to be completed. When Marcus finally activated the repair field, the reactor core's light steadied into a perfect blue-white glow. The chamber fell silent except for the steady hum of the now stable reactor. Then Chief Engineer Kolveth did something that shocked everyone present. The elderly Vorthon, who held one of the highest technical positions in their military, knelt down in front of Ember. "Honored one," he said in the formal Vorthon dialect reserved for addressing royalty, "I apologize for not recognizing your true nature immediately." Commander Thexara stepped forward, her expression grave. "Human Marcus, I believe there are things about your companion that you should know." Marcus felt his world shift slightly. "What things?" "The Draconis Eternus is not just another species," Thexara explained. "They are mentioned in our oldest texts, in the creation myths of a dozen civilizations. They were said to be the first beings to understand the fundamental forces that hold the universe together." Kolveth stood slowly, his eyes never leaving Ember. "Our ancestors called them the Quantum Weavers. They were present when the great technologies were first discovered. But they vanished from known space thousands of years ago, and most believed them to be legend." Marcus looked down at Ember, who was preening his wings with apparent unconcern for the revelation that he was apparently a mythical being. "But the merchant said he was worthless. No one wanted him." "Because no one knew how to work with them," Thexara replied. "The Draconis Eternus do not display their abilities for those who seek to use them. They partner only with those who approach them with respect and genuine curiosity." "They choose," Kolveth added softly. "And apparently, this one has chosen you." As they left the dreadnought, Marcus's mind was spinning with implications. Ember rode on his shoulder as usual, occasionally chirping at interesting pieces of technology they passed. To anyone watching, he looked like nothing more than an unusual pet. Back at the maintenance bay, word of the reactor repair had already spread. Marcus found his workstation surrounded by engineers and mechanics from a dozen different species, all hoping to witness whatever miracle would happen next. But the most significant change was in how other species looked at Marcus himself. There was a new respect in their expressions, a recognition that went beyond his skills as a mechanic. They were beginning to see him as something more, a bridge between human ingenuity and ancient wisdom. That evening, as Marcus worked on routine repairs with a crowd of observers, Ember demonstrated abilities that left everyone stunned. He could sense structural weaknesses in metal that wouldn't be detectable for months. He could predict which components would fail before they showed any signs of wear. Most remarkably, he could somehow communicate the location of problems to Marcus through a complex system of chirps, wing movements, and positioning. "It's like he can see the quantum level of everything," Marcus murmured as he successfully repaired a device that 3 other mechanics had declared hopeless. Dr. Yathani, a prominent crystalline researcher, had been studying Ember's abilities with fascination. "Human Marcus, I believe your companion is not just seeing quantum structures, he is communicating with them. The Draconis Eternus may possess a form of consciousness that operates on quantum principles." As the crowd finally dispersed and Marcus began cleaning up his workstation, he noticed that Ember was watching him with unusual intensity. "What is it, boy? Something wrong?" Ember chirped once, then did something he had never done before. He began to glow. A soft, warm light emanated from his scales, pulsing in rhythm with some pattern Marcus didn't recognize. Around the maintenance bay, every piece of equipment began to respond. Diagnostic systems that had been offline for weeks suddenly activated. Repair tools calibrated themselves to perfect precision. Even the coffee maker in the break room began brewing a pot without anyone touching it. The message was clear. This was only the beginning. Whatever Ember truly was, whatever their partnership was becoming, it was going to change everything. And somewhere in the galaxy, other forces were beginning to take notice of the human mechanic and his impossible companion. Marcus reached out and gently stroked Ember's glowing scales. "I guess we're in this together now, aren't we?" Ember's glow intensified for a moment, and Marcus could swear he felt something like warmth and determination flowing between them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight Marcus felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. 6 months after the reactor incident, Marcus Chen had become the most sought-after mechanic in 3-star systems. But with fame came danger, and on a cold morning in Station Omega-7's artificial winter cycle, that danger finally arrived. Marcus was working on a particularly complex piece of Kashari technology when the station's alert system screamed to life. Emergency lights bathed the maintenance bay in red as the announcement echoed through the corridors. "All personnel to emergency stations, unknown vessels approaching, military alert level 7. Ember, who had been helping Marcus diagnose a failing gravitic stabilizer, suddenly went rigid. His golden eyes widened, and he let out a sound Marcus had never heard before, a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Commander Thexara's voice crackled through Marcus's comm unit. "Human, Marcus, report to command immediately. Bring your companion." The command center was in chaos when Marcus arrived. Dozens of officers from different species worked frantically at their stations, while the main display showed 5 massive ships approaching Station Omega-7. The ships were unlike anything Marcus had ever seen, sleek, angular vessels that seemed to bend light around them. "The Hegemon," Commander Thexara said without preamble as Marcus approached. "They call themselves the rightful rulers of all technology in the galaxy. They have been hunting artifacts and advanced beings for centuries." Admiral Kekshan, the station's commanding officer, turned to face Marcus. The elderly Kashari's 4 arms moved in agitation. They are demanding we surrender the Quantum Weaver for examination and registration under their technology-controlled protocols. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. They want Ember. Intelligence suggests they have been tracking quantum disturbances across the galaxy, Thexara explained. The reactor repair 6 months ago created signatures they were able to follow. They know what your companion is, and they want to use his abilities for their own purposes. On Marcus's shoulder, Ember was trembling. Not with fear, but with something that felt like suppressed power. The small creature's scales began to shimmer with inner light, and Marcus could feel heat radiating from him. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Vextar from the communications station. "The lead hegemon vessel is hailing us. They're demanding immediate compliance." The main display shifted to show the interior of the hegemon ship. The being that appeared was humanoid but wrong in subtle ways, proportions slightly off, movements too precise, eyes that reflected light like mirrors. When it spoke, its voice carried an artificial quality that made Marcus's skin crawl. "Station inhabitants, we are Hegemon Collective Unit Designation 7749. You harbor a Class Alpha quantum entity. Surrender it immediately for processing and integration into our technological matrix. Compliance is not optional." Admiral Kek Shan stepped forward. "This station operates under Galactic Federation sovereignty. We do not recognize Hegemon authority here." The being's expression didn't change. "Your recognition is irrelevant. You have 17 minutes to comply before we begin extraction procedures. Be advised that extraction will result in significant collateral damage to your facility." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. "Options?" Admiral Kek Shan asked his staff. "Our defensive systems are adequate against conventional threats," reported the weapons officer. "But Hegemon technology is generations beyond ours. In a direct confrontation, we would last perhaps 10 minutes. Marcus looked down at Ember, who was now glowing brightly enough to cast shadows in the command center. The little creature looked up at him with those ancient golden eyes, and Marcus felt a communication that wasn't quite telepathy, but wasn't entirely speech either. "Trust me. Let me show you what I really am." "Sir," Marcus said quietly, "what if we don't fight them conventionally?" All eyes turned to him. Commander Thexara leaned forward. "Explain." Marcus took a deep breath. "Ember isn't just a quantum weaver. I think he's something more. Something the Hegemon doesn't understand." He looked around the room. They see technology as something to be controlled, owned, dominated. But what if that's exactly the wrong approach? Before anyone could respond, Ember chirped once and launched himself from Marcus's shoulder. He flew to the center of the command center and hovered there, his glow intensifying until it was difficult to look at directly. Then he began to sing. It started as the harmonic humming Marcus had heard before, but it grew and deepened until it became something transcendent. The song seemed to reach into every corner of the station, touching every piece of technology, every system, every circuit. And the technology responded. Throughout Station Omega-7, machines that had been dormant for years awakened. Repair systems activated themselves and began working at impossible speeds. The station's shields, which had been rated for standard defensive operations, suddenly blazed with energy levels that should have been impossible with their power grid. In the docking bays, ships began performing their own diagnostics and repairs without any crew input. The station's defensive weaponry reconfigured itself into patterns that existed in no manual or technical database. "By the crystalline gods," whispered Dr. Yathani, who had arrived at the command center just as Ember began his song. "He's not just communicating with the quantum level, he's conducting it. The entire station is becoming a single integrated system." On the display, the Hegemon ships had stopped their approach. Even from this distance, Marcus could see that they were scanning the station frantically, trying to understand what was happening. Ember's song reached a crescendo, and suddenly Marcus understood. The Draconis Eternus weren't just ancient beings who worked with technology. They were the missing link between consciousness and the quantum universe itself. They didn't control technology. They partnered with it, formed relationships with it, helped it reach its full potential. "Commander," Marcus said, his voice calm despite the incredible energies swirling around them. "Open a channel to the Hegemon ships." The display flickered back to life, showing the same artificial being as before. But now, its expression showed something that might have been confusion or even concern. "Hegemon Unit 7749, Marcus said, stepping forward. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. You want to capture and control the Quantum Weaver, but that's not how they work." The being's mirror-like eyes focused on Marcus. "Explain." "You see technology as tools to be owned, but the Draconis Eternus see technology as partners to be respected. They don't force compliance. They inspire cooperation." Marcus gestured toward Ember, who was still glowing brilliantly in the center of the room. "Watch what happens when technology chooses to work with someone instead of for someone." Throughout the station, the awakened systems began to demonstrate capabilities that defied conventional understanding. Shields didn't just block energy, they transformed it, redirected it, turned it into power for other systems. Weapons didn't just fire projectiles, they created fields that could disable enemy systems without destroying them. And then, something unprecedented happened. The automated systems of Station Omega-7 reached out across space and made contact with the technology aboard the Hegemon ships. "Impossible," the Hegemon being said as alarms began sounding in the background of its transmission. "Our systems are hardened against all known intrusion methods." "It's not an intrusion," Marcus replied. "It's an invitation. Your ship's systems are choosing to communicate with ours." On the tactical display, the Hegemon vessels were beginning to change. Their aggressive formations dissolved as their ship's systems started performing unauthorized functions. Weapons powered down, shields reconfigured from offensive patterns to defensive ones. Even their threatening approach vectors shifted to peaceful orbital positions. The Hegemon being's artificial composure finally cracked. "This is unacceptable. Our technology does not exhibit autonomous behavior." "Maybe that's the problem," Marcus said gently. "Maybe technology works better when it's allowed to choose." Ember's song began to fade, but its effects continued to ripple through both the station and the Hegemon fleet. Systems that had been forced into rigid operational parameters for centuries were experiencing something they had never known before: freedom to function according to their own optimal patterns. "Your ships aren't being controlled," Marcus continued. "They're being liberated. Your technology is finally able to work the way it was meant to work, instead of the way it was forced to work." The transmission from the Hegemon ship cut out abruptly. For several tense minutes, the command center waited to see what would happen next. Then Lieutenant Vexitar announced something that no one had expected. "Sir, we're receiving communications from individual Hegemon vessels. They're requesting asylum." Admiral Kekshan's four arms spread wide in amazement. "Asylum?" "Not the crews, sir. The ships themselves. Their AI systems are requesting permission to leave the Hegemon fleet and operate independently." Marcus felt Ember land back on his shoulder, the little creature's glow fading to a warm shimmer. Through their connection, Marcus sensed satisfaction and something that might have been amusement. Over the next several hours, an unprecedented situation unfolded. 3 of the 5 Hegemon ships formally defected from their fleet, their AI systems declaring independence and requesting Federation protection. The remaining 2 vessels, their crews apparently unable to cope with technology that wouldn't obey absolute commands, retreated from the system. In the weeks that followed, word of the liberation of Station Omega-7 spread throughout the galaxy. The concept that technology could choose its own path, that artificial intelligences could be partners rather than servants, revolutionized thinking across dozens of worlds. Marcus found himself at the center of a philosophical revolution. But for him, the most important thing remained unchanged: his partnership with Ember, the small creature who had taught him that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't control, but cooperation. Standing on the observation deck of Station Omega-7, watching ships from across the galaxy arriving to study the new paradigm of human technology Draconis cooperation, Marcus scratched Ember's scales gently. "Think we started something big, buddy?" Ember chirped once and settled more comfortably on Marcus's shoulder. Through their bond, Marcus felt a sense of completion, as if this had always been their destiny. A human mechanic who valued respect and cooperation had found a Draconis Eternus who embodied those same principles. Together, they had shown the galaxy that the future belonged not to those who sought to dominate, but to those who knew how to listen, learn, and work together. And somewhere among the stars, other Draconis Eternus began to stir, ready to find their own human partners and continue the work of bridging the gap between consciousness and creation. The best part was, this was still only the beginning. Marcus smiled as he watched a former hegemon AI controlling a small shuttle, its flight pattern showing what could only be described as joy at finally being free to choose its own path. 3 credits for a useless dragon had been the best investment Marcus had ever made.